Good afternoon, Singapore, and good morning, Norway. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Susanna Quang. On behalf of Innovation Norway, I'm happy to welcome you on board this webinar on circular economy. I shall now invite our Commercial Counsellor and Director of Innovation Norway, Paul Kastmann, to deliver the welcome remarks. Paul, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Day 2 of Singapore Norway Innovation Conference and this session on smart urban solutions. My name is Paul Kastmann and I'm the Director of Innovation Norway in Singapore. Innovation Norway constitutes the commercial and science section of the Norwegian Embassy in Singapore, and we work closely with Norwegian business as well as Norwegian research institutions as well as their counterparts in Singapore. I'm also the chairman of Nordic Innovation House here in Singapore, that some of you might know, and I'm on the board together with Leonard, Stornes in NBAS. For those of you that followed yesterday's program, we addressed some of the global challenges that are shaping our time and how Singapore and Norway are working with the green transition. The main takeaway, I think, is the need for urgency. And on the flip side, with large challenges, also come large opportunities. How can smart, sustainable solution help solve these challenges? Today, we will look at specific problem statements within the maritime and urban dimensions, and we have decided to run 2 parallel sessions to do the topics justice. One is addressing maritime digitalization and decarbonization. That is the other session, not this one. And then there is this session, which looks at circular economy in an urban setting. Now, circular economy is a broad topic, and we have chosen to target 2 specific segments. We will look at how we can attain a circular economy through the establishment of a deposit return scheme, or pantordning, as we call it in Norwegian. What we have learned from DRS implemented in other countries around the world is important. What are the criteria underpinning a future DRS system in Singapore, as well as the Southeast Asia region at large? We will also look at urban food waste management. Singapore has an ambition of 30 by 30, which means that 30% of all the food consumed here in Singapore should be produced domestically. Today, this number is less than 10%, so that target is quite ambitious. It should happen within the next 9 years. Like Singapore and Norway, most countries have an ambitious ambition to implement a more efficient management of food and organic waste. Today, a lot of it is incinerated, which is also the case here in Singapore. And this will obviously have to change if Singapore is to reach its target of 30% domestically produced food by 2030. We will look at the alternative uses of food waste and the kind of byproducts that you can use and produce from the waste. How can we utilize more food that we produce? I'd like to extend my gratitude to our fellow Team Norway partners in this event, the Embassy and NBAS, as well as our local partners, the panelists, and not least the moderators. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to give the word to the President of NBAS, Leonard Stornes. Leo, the floor is yours.
A very warm welcome to the second day of Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference. We live in a world with constant changes and high level of uncertainties, but we are all aware of the driving forces within our societies and the operating environment, with clear trends towards digitalization, decarbonization, alternative fuel, focus on sustainability, circular economy, clean recycling, and the handling of food waste. These are all areas of expertise where many Norwegian companies and universities have core knowledge and experience, and should in many respects be natural partners for the authorities and businesses in Singapore. I therefore hope that the discussions today will help in the process with developing synergies between Singapore and Norway, as Singapore also has a lot to offer Norway. If you are not yet connected to the Norwegian Business Association but would like to know more, reach out to us and we look forward to have a conversation with you. I would like to thank Innovation Norway and the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Singapore for the very good cooperation during the planning and organizing of Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference. And I hope that you all find value in the topic and discussions that will be on the agenda today. Thank you.
Yeah, a very good afternoon and a good morning from myself too. My name is Corrado, Christian Lillelund Forcellati, and it is truly a privilege and an honor for me to introduce the keynote speaker for today, Professor Seeram Ramakrishna. I know you are passionate about circular economy. You told me before that you keep learning, but allow us today to have you as a professor and enlightening us. Professor Seeram is a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. He's the chairman of Plastics Recycling Center of Excellence of the Plastics Recycling Association of Singapore. He's a member of the Extended Producer Responsibility Committee of Ministry of the Environment, of Sustainability and the Environment, alongside NEA. So I think you have a number of credentials that make you truly an expert. And what I also find fascinating, your book about circular economy has gained a lot of attention. You have been awarded the 2021 Springer Nature China Development Award. You have been recognized as a thought leader and one of the most influential mindsets or minds by Thomson Reuters. So Professor Seeram, I have only to ask you to take the stage and give us your keynote speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corrado, for having me on your panel and inviting me to deliver keynote lecture. Excellencies, panelists, moderators, virtual audience, a good afternoon to all of you. As the chairman of Plastic Recycling Center of Excellence and a board member of Plastic Recycling Association of Singapore, I convey our sincere appreciation to the Norwegian Business Association Singapore for organizing this Norway-Singapore Innovation Conference 2021 with a theme very close to my heart, circular economy. Sustainable circular economy is vital to Singapore as well as the rest of the world. I'm glad to report that Norwegian company TOMRA is a member of PRAS and the Norwegian University of Science and Technology signed an MOU with PRCOE to partner in the areas of plastic circular economy. Singapore is hastening efforts to transform into a net zero, climate resilient, sustainable circular economy. Awareness of human activities cause global warming and social costs is now far greater than COP1 held in 1995 in Germany. A recent survey of over 500 businesses and consumers revealed that consumers expect businesses to put more environmental concerns ahead of profits. Key motivators for the businesses to move towards net zero emissions were regulations, financial market pressure, and climate-related risk. About 96% of the consumers said they had been affected by the climate change, yet cost and convenience were their concerns when it comes to making greener choices. In other words, public want climate action while they remain ambivalent on personal responsibility. In the case of governments as well as corporations, there is a gap between their pledges and effective implementation. The last 1 year, countries around the world already experience the impact of climate change. And the world leaders are getting ready to attend COP26, going to be held towards the end of this month in UK. COP26 is about coercing countries to deeper cooperation to secure global net zero emissions by mid-century and achieve 1.5 degrees within the reach. Global community is asked to invest much more and raise the speed and scale of its pledges to emission reductions by 2030, as well as attaining net zero by 2050. On this note, I like to highlight we must ask the countries as well as corporations also specify materials consumption, meaning total materials and chemicals in an economy, a reduction of them, and material decarbonization targets in respect to climate actions for the following reasons. More than 100 billion tons of materials are used in 2017 to build homes and infrastructure, provide consumer goods, electronic goods, fashion, food, water, energy, transportation, and generate power. About 23% of global emissions in 2020 are attributed to material production. Correspondingly, the global material footprint increased by 70%. Recent studies have shown that going forward, countries as well as corporations must factor true environmental and social costs of materials, because there are not enough resources and environmental capacity of Earth to provide projected increase in the world population from the current 7.7 billion to 9.7 billion by 2050. Fulfilling their demand for better standards of living, higher consumption, require natural resources equivalent of several planet Earths. Circular economy is desirable alternative to the linear economy. If the world economy embraces circular economy strategies and increases circularity from the current 8.6 to 17%, the world will reduce global emissions by 39% and material footprint by 28%. As an island nation, Singapore has always been aware of the need to balance economic development and environmental sustainability. To overcome the limitations of land and the landfilling sites, Singapore embraced Green Plan 2030, which is a whole of nation effort to build a sustainable circular economy. 5 key pillars of Singapore Green Plan 2030 are city in nature, sustainable living, energy reset, green economy, and resilient future. In other words, Green Plan aims to reduce the waste sent to the landfill per capita per day by 20% by 2026, with the goal of reaching 30% by 2030. The landmark Resource Sustainability Act, RSA in short, was enacted in 2019 to give the legislative effect to the regulatory measures targeting the entire 3 priority solid waste streams of Singapore: electronic waste, food waste, packaging waste that includes plastics. RSA enabled the introduction of Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR framework. The framework mandates producers and suppliers of regulated products to be responsible for the collection and proper treatment and disposal with the safe handling and extraction of valuable resources from the waste. An example of EPR framework has already been implemented in the e-waste management from July 2021. Moving forward, 2024, Singapore would be introducing EPR concept for the food waste as well. As a precursor to the planned EPR framework, for packaging waste that includes plastics by 2025, Singapore commenced mandatory packaging reporting framework from this year, January. Under this framework, producers of packaged products will be required to submit packaging data as well as 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle plans to the National Environmental Agency. Packaging waste, including plastics, is one of the Singapore's priority waste streams due to high rates of generation and low rates of recycling. At the launch of PROS in August 2021, Minister Grace Fu said, in developing and expanding our recycling capabilities for plastic waste, Singapore will implement a beverage container return scheme as the first phase of EPR for packaging waste. Producers such as the beverage companies will be accountable for collection, recycling of their beverage bottles. Consumers will get a refund when they return the empty beverage containers at designated return points. The scheme is aimed to increase the collection of plastic waste and support the plastic recycling industry in Singapore. Towards this end, NEA will be implementing Deposit Refund Scheme, DRS, for beverage containers by 2022 as the first phase of EPR approach for packaging waste management. It has been noted that DR has been implemented in several countries, including our partners, Norway and Sweden and Germany, achieving high recycling rates of beverage containers over 80%. Successful DRS will catalyze plastic recycling industry in Singapore. Packaging and plastic waste are often heterogeneous and require a range of solutions. Mechanical recycling, chemical recycling are complementary methods for closing the plastics loop and achieving higher circularity. Waste collection is a critical step in managing the waste. For effective recycling, identification, sorting, segregation of plastic waste are necessary. Watermarking, digital marking, or molecular labeling of plastics is a useful solution. Coupled with fourth industrial revolution technologies, will further strengthen our waste management solutions. They must be augmented with eco-friendly design of products, enhancing materials efficiency of products, life cycle engineering, sourcing of plastics from renewable and local sources, additive-free plastics, zero social costs of plastics, microbial valorization via bioengineered enzymes, and so on. In order to achieve highest circularity of plastics with low carbon footprint, further research and innovations via reimagining molecules is also envisaged. What else is necessary to realize a sustainable circular economy? Let us delve into this aspect via plastics example. One of the tenets of circular economy is prevention and reduction of materials use. There are limits to this tenet as evidenced by the essential role of plastics in dealing with COVID-19 pandemic. World generates 300 million tons of plastic waste every year. Only 9% is recycled and 12% is incinerated. 79% is accumulated in the nature around the world. Improved waste management methods certainly will enhance recycling rates. Circular economy must be undergirded with other measures such as suitable for sustainable future. For example, greater efficiency in industrial processes will lower the material footprint by 10%. Further gains can be realized by optimizing interdependencies across industry and economies. Embracing sound solid waste management, thoroughly vetted by the environmental and social costs. Innovating materials as the sinks of emissions, and further making efforts to minimize the consumption and environmental impact on planet Earth, which seems to have hard limits. Reducing materials carbon footprint, enhancing circularity requires innovations at atomic, molecular chemistry, and biology of different materials. It is important to develop credible evidences to avoid efforts dismissed as greenwashing. Often, greenwashing leads to unintended counterproductive outcomes if not properly assessed in terms of sustainability and practical feasibility. This calls for deeper understanding of the trade-offs across materials carbon footprint, circularity, recyclability, waste reduction, environmental effects, and social costs. In closing, I like to summarize. Circular economy presents many new opportunities for Singapore as well as our international partners, as the management of solid waste affects every human being. Realization of circular economy transition requires active, meaningful partnerships among all stakeholders, especially the government, business community, research community, and international partners. No stakeholder alone can transform into a net zero sustainable circular economy. The need for circular economy is rising in the region. Viable and effective solutions for sustainable growth and development are in demand. On this note, I'd like to wish you all a candid, fruitful discussions on sustaining circular economy so as to build back a greener world. Thank you for your attention. If you are interested, my speech, which is written, is available to the conference organizers so that you can verify more information that led to my speech. I'd like to thank Corrado for chairing this session and the opportunity to deliver this keynote. Thank you, Corrado.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, Prof. Seeram, I think there are many good points that you brought up, and setting the scene to the panel discussion. I think what made me reflect a bit, you mentioned that 23% of global emissions in 2020 are actually attributable to material production, and that circular economy, besides bringing the benefit in terms of reducing those emissions, do have restorative capabilities if we are able to close the loop. And that is one of the points that I'm sure I'm going to discuss with my speakers today on the DRS in particular. And I think this is particularly important, and we see that perfectly captured in the Singapore Green Plan, where the focus is also on, as you mentioned, Professor, on reducing recycling and reusing materials, in particular plastic being the stream of interest in order for Singapore to create a secondary market for plastic in particular. The DRS, just to give a context before introducing my panelist, is part already of the Zero Master Plan. Is also the first, Singapore is the first country in Asia to introduce a DRS. So we are also excited to see how the DRS and how Singapore can be of inspiration and create some larger implication, or to your point, opportunities that are stretching beyond the Singapore and thereby much more pertaining to the region, and helping, catalyzing as well interest in terms of competencies, but also industrial interest around plastic recycling in more specifically. With great excitement, I would say I would like to introduce my panel for today, starting with Bing from TOMRA, followed by Leng from Zero Waste, Thomas from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and finally Kjell Olav from Infinitum. And Kjell Olav, if I can start handing the stage over to you for a short introduction of yourself and Infinitum, and followed by Leng, Bing, and Thomas. And then we will start the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, and to everyone. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to this interesting conference. My name is Olav Maldum. I'm Managing Director for Infinitum. That's the company responsible for the DRS in Norway. My background before I started in Infinitum in 2007, I was working for a company that was responsible for the environmental work for the retail chain in Norway. So I was working 6 years, and we started to look into the logistics. And then we saw that we need to do a lot of things with the packaging for the grocery goods. So I was working with that in 6 years. And before that, I was working at National Institute of Technology. And we were looking into electrical vehicle and alternative fuels. But then we saw that maybe the most important projects was to look into the yield, the use of the trucks, the logistics. So then we started to look inside the truck and start working with the packaging and the use of the packaging and so on. Today I'm talking about Infinitum and give you a short presentation for how we do the operation. Let's take the next slide. Yeah. So Infinitum is a DRS, and like the other DRS in the Nordic and Baltic countries, we are one operator covering the whole country. So when the producer, they make a product, beverage or beer, they put it into beverage packaging, can or PET or HDPE bottle. Then they become a member of Infinitum, and we look into the packaging and say, okay, this is applicable with our recycling process. So we have focus on the PET bottle, what type of glue, label, and so on to ensure high yield in the recycling process. Then the producer are allowed to put the product on the market. The consumer empty the packaging and deliver back the packaging because they only borrow the packaging. It's important to get the material back into the loop. They go to a shop where they have a reverse vending machine, or to a kiosk or gasoline station, a small corner shop without a reverse vending machine, deliver back the empties. The shop, they will put the empties in the bag. If you have a reverse vending machine, the compaction, then it's compacted. All the units are registered on the barcode and shape, so it's very accurate counting on the units. Then the shop prepare the bag, and we will pick it up and take it into our logistic hub to the sorting and baling plant that we have. So we separate PET from aluminium, and then we color sort the PET bottles, and then it's transported to the recycler, and the material is prepared to be reused in the beverage packaging. And we cover all the costs for the total operation. We pay for the service that the shop do when they invest in their reverse vending machine, the area they use, and the workforce and so on. We cover all the logistics. So when you buy a product in Norway on a beverage packaging, if it's a can of PET, all costs are included for the take back of the empties and so on. So next slide. In Norway, we say that the system is a 100% producer responsibility system, since all costs are covered and the producer are responsible for the operation. Next slide. Infinitum, in short figures, we call it a private-owned value chain company. It's non-for-profit, but I don't like the terms because it's easy to be non-profit. What's important is to make it efficient. So we also been looked upon from the authority that we are extended part of the producer's responsibility. It's owned 50-50 by the producer and retailer. The operation started 3rd of May 1999, but we have had DRS since 1902 I come back to the reason why Infinitum was established in 1999. It's around 1.4 billion cans and bottles in 2020. In 2021, we see we are going up to almost 1.7 billion cans and bottles. It's around 22,000 tons of PET, and today we could supply about 80% recycled content in all PET bottles in Norway, and we can do that year in and year out based on the deposit rate and the yield in the recycling process. Same goes for aluminium, and we have around 11,000 tons of aluminium. Next. So we claim that Infinitum runs a material pool system for aluminium and PET. So when the industry uses all of our material, it's a reusable system with the lowest environmental impact. We see there's a lot of discussion, and I think in a lot of market you also have refillable bottles in the old terms that you take it back, wash it, and fill it up again. Our system is also a refillable system, but have a lower environmental impact. Next slide. This is an important question to ask. What's the problem? We see a lot of politicians are focused on the littering. We think it's important to look at the resources. How can you deliver a product or service at the lowest environmental impact possible? That's important because the population is growing and we have to be much more efficient regarding service and product deliveries. Next. Then it's important to see what can you bring back to the market. We also see a lot of discussion about recycling rate, how much, and then they stated that that's what you take back from the market. But how can you achieve the highest environmental impact? And that's the collection rate. You need to collect all that's put on the market. And then it's important to have a clean, good quality on the material, good control of the material before it's put on the market. So you know it's recyclable and that you can recycle it in an efficient way with a high yield. Next. And of course, if you also focus on the cost per unit, we claim that the lower the cost is for the producer or consumer, the more efficient the system is. And of course, this has to do with the logistics. The more efficient you are on the logistics, the lower the cost, the lower the environmental impact from the system as well. And of course, good quality material with a high yield, you get a good income from the sales of the material you have collected and prepared for reuse. Next. Yes. In Norway, we have a particular solution. In all the Nordic and Baltic countries, we have the POSI system. But in Norway, it's a special setup because in the 90s, when countries around the world stopped using DRS because they shifted from a refillable glass bottle to non-refillable PET bottle, then we saw it will become a littering problem. But in Norway, the politicians, they established an environmental cost model. They said if you are putting a bottle or can into the market with no collection system, you have to pay a very high cost per unit. And it's extremely high cost. It's around 35,000 euro per ton of aluminium or 100,000 euro per ton of PET that you have to pay to the tax authority in Norway if you don't have a collection system. So then the industry sat down around the table together with the retailer and discussed, okay, what should we do? We have an old DRS system for the refillable. Should we go into other system? And then next slide, please. Okay, and then we saw that we have a different setup for packaging, so we can compete with a different system, but still they are able to run in parallel. But most of the producers, they want to be a part of our system. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kjell Olav. Leng, can I ask you to go next?
Yes, certainly. Hi, everyone. I'm Leng from Zero Waste SG. So yes, good afternoon to those in Singapore and good morning to those in Norway. Very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Just to tell you a little bit about Zero Waste SG, we are a non-governmental organization, NGO and charity in Singapore, driving zero waste actions through education and advocacy. And our main focus areas are in food waste, plastic waste, of course, household recycling, as well as organization waste. So in our outreach efforts, I think we work really closely with corporates to deep dive into their work processes to see how we can perhaps eliminate or minimize waste through more efficient work processes. And on the public front, we also look at how can we interface with publics to raise awareness on issues on waste, on actions to reduce waste. I don't have any slides for the DRS per se. I thought maybe we can have a longer discussion at the panel and also with the audience. But I think just to maybe list some points from our perspective on the DRS, I think it's useful to look at the DRS or deposit refund scheme as part of the EPR, the extended producer responsibility. I think it's important that producers do have oversight over the energy or carbon footprint, of the whole life cycle of their products. I think what will be interesting to also talk about and hopefully expand a little bit more later on is the role that stakeholders like the individuals or consumers can play and have to play in this ecosystem to ensure that the implementation of such a scheme is smooth and actually successful. So I think with that, I'll just leave it there and look forward definitely to exchanging views later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Leng. Welcome to the panel. Bing, please.
Thank you, Corrado. Thank you, Innovation Norway and BUF for having me. So my name is Bing. At TOMRA, I'm heading our collection business in Asia, so where we focus on how to get hold of more valuable material in the first place. I have a background in a cross-section of environmental engineering and finance, which I think DRS is also a lot about. I'm a Norwegian Chinese, so it means I have Asian roots, but I also grew up returning, punting empty bottles. So I'm very excited to be here today. So just briefly on TOMRA. TOMRA's story started back in 1972, where two brothers in Norway invented the world's first reverse vending machine after a local grocery asked them to help to collect empty glass containers. So we have kept the innovation spirit until this day today. TOMRA has built a successful growth story today. We employ more than 4,300 people with an annual turnover of close to 10 billion Norwegian kroners. Next, please. So I don't need to spend too long time to explain why it's so important to focus on resources. Thankfully, Professor Seeram has touched enough on this. And of course, we know that resources, they are finite. So TOMRA have really made it our vision to try to tackle the waste problem. And of course, we also know that plastics is definitely one of the main areas we should focus. So therefore, TOMRA has also pledged to enable 40% of all the plastic packaging to be recycled. And then hopefully we can also achieve 30% of the plastic being recycled in a closed loop. So, and of course we know that we cannot do this alone, but we really would like to support to this journey and to reduce the world's reliance on fossil fuels. So next, please. So how are we gonna contribute? TOMRA has a really unique positioning in the recycling value chain. We are present in the collection, which is the first step in every recycling process, by providing advanced reverse vending machines to take back empty beverage containers. After getting hold of the material, we are also doing advanced sensor-based sorting of that material to enable high quality recycling. So for now, I'll briefly dive into more on the collection side. Next, please. TOMRA provides more than 80,000 reverse vending installations in more than 40 markets globally. And as you see, we actually collect more than 40 billion containers annually. You might think this is a big number, but in fact, this only accounts for less than 3% of all the beverage containers sold in the world. So this simply means that there is still a big opportunity for us to come. We typically operate in markets where there are deposit return schemes in place. And we see that the DRS is a very effective tool to increase the recycling rate and also enable closed loop recycling. So therefore, we are also very excited and would like to contribute to the success of DRS introduction in Singapore. Next. And we do have some visions too. So we have basically asked ourselves the question, why are some deposit return markets in the world succeeding while others are failing? So we would like to bring our long-term experience and knowledge also to share this with Singapore when Singapore is about to introduce DRS for the first time. But we also acknowledge that every DRS is different, and the DRS in Singapore will need to cater for the unique demographics, the consumer preferences, the consumption patterns, etc., for Singapore. So we really would like to combine our global expertise with local presence to contribute to the success. And finally, we also see that Singapore is leading the way with its Green Plan 2030 commitments. And we see the importance of success in Singapore to have a very positive spillover effect for the rest of the region so that we can contribute to a sustainable living for all. Finally, turn to my final page. I just have one small teaser for our newly established TOMRA Resource Transformation Center. So this is an experience center where we would like to engage and empower all stakeholders to play their part in a more sustainable living. So here we hope that the visitors, they can simulate a DRS journey, they can trial out our different type of reverse vending machines with seamless digital integration. So we really hope to welcome all of you there. And we can promise a rewarding experience. And because after all, recycling should be a rewarding experience. Thank you.
Bing, thank you so much and welcome to the panel. Finally, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for this opportunity. So I'm Thomas Chhoa. I'm a senior advisor to the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. I've been with the organization since its inception, which is only just over 2 years ago. So this is a relatively young and upcoming organization. It is a not-for-profit with a global mandate. With this material, I'll try and explain a little bit more as we go along. So next, please. I think we all know the challenge around the world, which I think other panelists have already shared some of those challenges. Suffice to say, I think this is a global problem, right? It's a global concern, just like climate change is, and it ties in actually quite well. The two are interlinked, and I hope the audience in this webinar can share that burden of having to do something rather drastically in order to change the challenge that we have not only in our oceans but in the environment generally. Next, please. So back at the beginning of 2019, 27 founding CEOs of global massive, companies have got together and basically said that, as plastic value chain industry players, they cannot just sit back and watch the plastic waste problem in the environment. So the industry basically feels that they have to be part of the solution rather than just being, a supplier or just being a producer or just being a participant in the plastic value chain. So these CEOs have the foresight and have the vision to take on their role and leadership role in terms of finding solutions to what is, as we all agree, a global problem. So they set a target to raise $1.5 billion. Today, we've already raised over $1 billion in order to do what they have set up the Alliance to End Plastic Waste to do. We understand that this, although this number might look big, just like earlier on, it was shared that those billion numbers of containers might sound a big number, but this is relatively small, because I just want to share with the audience that it is a multi-billion-dollar problem that we have with respect to plastic waste. But the industry leaders have decided that at least they could, start this whole process going. And we are also trying to catalyze more capital as we go along, working with others, working with other institutions, which I'll share with you. So it's a membership organization. It's set up as a 501c3 in the US. So effectively, it is a public charity. It doesn't have a mission to go out and make any profit at all. But we, of course, are looking, just like many other organizations, to support sustainable solutions. We do a lot of thinking, obviously, in terms of identifying where the issues are. And in fact, we're quite proud of us, what we call plastic circularity gaps, which we can share at a different time. But we are a do tank. So the Alliance prides itself in being a do tank. We just don't talk about the problem. We want to be part of the solution rollout, and we would fund those solution rollout. So this is one, probably a unique feature of the Alliance, right? So it is not just plastic value chain players, which makes it unique in that we understand the whole plastic production, the raw material, the conversion of plastic into products, but also in terms of collection, waste management, and recycling. Talk about membership. Bing's organization, who spoke before me, TOMRA, is also a member company of the Alliance. Next, please. So here's just an example of who are our member companies, and you can see producing companies like BASF, Shell and Exxon and Chevron Phillips and Dow Chemicals. These are some of the big companies that have got together to decide that they needed to participate in the solution of plastic waste. But you can also see that there are other companies there like Procter & Gamble, brand owners like PepsiCo, packaging companies like Henkel, and of course, companies like TOMRA involved in waste sorting and waste management is a member, besides Suez and Veolia, who are global waste management companies. There are recycling companies also as members here, like Gemini, and they have nearly all of these companies have got basically global presence. And the other unique feature of the Alliance is that we can call on their expertise in a respective part of the value chain in order to participate in the plastic circularity challenge that we have. So not only are they contributing in terms of funds to the Alliance, but they're also contributing expertise and they're contributing resources on the ground to assist with the mission of the Alliance. The other point I would like to highlight is it covers across the world. You can see members from Japan like Kirin. You can see members in Southeast Asia like SCG in Thailand. You can see members like Reliance in India, besides the obvious one of American companies and European companies, with South American companies like Braskem. So we're very proud that we have global reach and global membership. We have grown from 27 companies now to 66 companies, and we're targeting 100 companies within the next few months. Next, please. So besides those membership companies, we're working with important stakeholders and partners to make this work. Organizations like ADB, Asia Development Bank, USAID, UN organizations. We also have support companies with the competencies in their respective area, consulting companies like Bain, BCG, Kearney, for example. They're offering their services in kind in order to participate in basically ending plastic waste in the environment. Next, please. So we work along 4 fronts. Probably the biggest area where we focus on is infrastructure, especially in high leakage locations and areas. infrastructure is lacking. We understand that, and we have many projects focusing on infrastructure. And the second pillar that's important, that's been mentioned earlier on, is innovation. We participate in enabling new startups. We try to encourage development and research capabilities on finding technical solutions. But let me also stress that that is not the end of it, right? So we understand the importance of education that's been mentioned by Hui-Ling. Education and engagement, we call it, right? Engaging with the community is also a very big part of what the Alliance would like to focus on. And finally, you can't just look at what you might be able to do. There's a problem staring at us right now. So we also have cleanup activities. And this year, for example, we have a global program called Clean for Change, which Minister Grace Fu actually helped us to launch that program globally. Next, please. So whatever solution we come up with, we want to make sure it's sustainable, it's scalable. That's very, very important, right? It's no point coming up with a solution that tackles a very specific part of the value chain or problem that is not replicable. So we want to make sure that whatever partner or initiative we support is scalable, so that we're dealing with billions of packages or plastic waste packages, or billions of PET bottles, rather than just a few million of them, right? Because the problem is so large. Catalytic, so we know we can't do it ourselves. We need to catalyze like-minded organizations, like-minded people, in order to get involved in this whole process with us. And finally, we strive for circularity. It is important to demonstrate that the plastic cycle is not just a linear one. We can bring it back and turn it into a resource. One of the things that I am most enthusiastic about is to try and get our neighbors, our governments, our community to understand that waste is actually not a problem. It is a resource. And I argue that every country in the world has waste, and so therefore every country in the world has resources. You could even call it, I wouldn't say natural resources, but resources that they actually have in order to do something with it. Next, please. Yeah,
Thomas,
just to show you that we
Thomas,
have.
Sorry, mindful of time, can I welcome to the panel and then take some of those discussions in the panel?
Yeah, sure. Over to you then.
Thank you. My apologies, but I'm a bit mindful of the time. So thank you all for your sharing and picking up some of the points that you share. I would like to structure the discussion around three main headlines. So from Hui-Ling and Kjell Olav, I think you brought up the role of stakeholders. So I will. This is one of the areas that we will be zooming a little bit into. The second being, I like what you're saying, recycling should be a rewarding journey. So let's look into the value of that journey. So that will be the second stream that we'll be looking into. And Thomas, finally, I got from you was really interesting is how to make it as a success by looking into, for example, those 4 pillars of infrastructure, innovation, engagement, and also including the cleanup. So if we start with the role of the stakeholders, Kjell Olav, you mentioned in your presentation that taking back, so the collection is definitely part of the equation here. How can we actually close that loop to ensure that whatever get collected also goes back into the economy?
When you have the DRS, you have already given the consumer the economic incentive to come back with the empties. So I think that's the important first step, is to get the inhabitants, the consumer, the reason to take back the packaging material into the system. And then, of course, it's important because the Norwegian legislation quoted as everyone selling a product are obliged to take it back. So then you know that even a kiosk or gasoline station, if you bought a bottle with beverage, you can go in and deposit, deliver it back, get rid of it immediately. So that's give the efficiency. So I think that, and this is regulated by the authority in Norway, and I think this is a good idea to say that everyone that sells product should be a part of the take-back system to help make it easy for the consumer to deliver back whatever you have into the system.
Bing, what would be your view?
Yes, I can only add to Olav that the material that goes through NDRS, it can be easily recycled already using existing technology of today because the quality is so high and the contamination rate is typically low. So what is needed after the collection process is that you need an efficient logistics, right? The logistics, as Olav will know, actually accounts for a large part of the total cost related to NDRS. So typically, if you can utilize reverse logistics, etc., this will be very beneficial. And then the next step clearly is that you will actually need to have capacity to recycle the material. And as of now, we know that Singapore actually don't have any domestic PET recycling plant. So TOMRA also support work to really examine whether there could be possibility to establish local recycling capabilities, also knowing that this is clearly one of the ambitions behind the Singaporean DRS. The final point I would like to stress is that, yes, you have then the material, it's recycled, but then you need to actually find offtake for it, right? And we know that the recycling market can be volatile because it is affected by price of virgin material and also in general investment sentiment. So one effective tool that actually the government can help to intervene is to set minimum recycled content targets to actually ensure that the producers, they will put a minimum amount of recycled material into their packaging. So one example is EU's single-use plastic directive, where they mandate that by 2025, all plastic PET beverage bottles needs to have minimum 25% recycled content, increasing to 30% by 2030. And we also see that several bottle bill states in US, they have also done the same. And this could be also some path to follow, for example, for Singapore.
Leng, based on your advocacy role, the zero waste, are we ready as consumer?
That's an interesting question, Corrado. I've been thinking about that. So I think on paper, the deposit refund scheme is something that ought to work, right? You have, the consumers, paying upfront, maybe a premium a little bit more, with the expectation that when they return the product, they get back their deposit. And so it's really no cost in that sense to consumers. But I think in Singapore, what we're really used to are cash for trash schemes or our current reverse vending machine. And what this does is really, there's no increase in the cash outlay that consumers have. But if they bring it back to these collection points, then they get either a credit or some kind of monetary reward. So in that sense, then the deposit refund scheme really becomes an incentive scheme, do it or not, but you still pay the same retail price in that sense. And I think we all know that incentives are a little less effective than when you have skin in the game and the whole ecosystem works in unison. But I would say that having a scheme like the deposit refund scheme, that's a really elegant design, and really helping motivate the right behavior. So it starts all the way, just to add on to Kjell's Olaf's point and as well as Bing's point. I think, when you have a scheme that is about collecting recyclables that is a dedicated waste stream, that is a single type of recyclable, and you have a scheme that is rolled out full scale where the infrastructure is there, you get both, maybe cleaner recyclables. The rate of our recycling contamination is really high, and that's why we have a low recycling rate. So, with this dedicated scheme, you get something cleaner. You also get maybe critical mass to be able to, build capacity, be able to roll it out in a larger way, and for it to really take hold in Singapore. So yeah, that's one part, mechanisms aside, it's really how you can then influence consumer behavior to help. I think consumers themselves have to also make a stand. We definitely have the collective power, I guess, action to really have, to signal to the market, hey, we're actually ready. We're ready to co-share responsibility, ready to change the way that we behave, the way that we deal with our trash. Yeah, you levy the charge on us, but we'll bring it back to you with full expectations that then you will return us the deposits. I think really it's about market signaling and being ready to make that change. It's a mindset change, it's a habit change. And of course, then it has got to be supported by education, by campaigns, by really raising public awareness. So yeah, I think that's the whole.
Yeah, so because I also got from every of yours insight and sharing that this collaboration across different stakeholders is key. So definitely as a consumer, we do play a part. Thomas, you mentioned the cleanup pillar. Just thinking about this stakeholders' role on DRS and picking on Leng's point about this clean recycling economy, can you imagine DRS being expanded to other materials?
Besides
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a plan actually to address that broader challenge of other types of plastic waste in the extended producer responsibility. I think we talked about packaging. So I think to answer your question, Corrado, I think Singapore has already got a plan to introduce EPR for packaging, which includes, of course, plastic waste. By 2025, I think that's the timeline. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
And indeed, the challenge actually, if I may say so, is not so much PET when it comes to plastic waste, because plastic waste, PET, you've got a DRS system that has been demonstrated in many locations. The challenge is actually the low value plastic waste, the flexibles, the multi-layers, the single-use plastic bags, and all those difficult to collect and difficult to segregate type of plastic waste.
Thanks, Thomas. If we should move into the question around recycling being a rewarding journey, is there an appropriate level for that reward? I know that the TOMRA has done some studies, so can you share a little bit your insights?
Right, yes. So clearly, I guess we need to be clear on why bother, right? To kind of look at this value of this refund or deposit. I would just only refrain from using the word fee, because clearly this is not the cost to a consumer. This is kind of a reward that will be returned to them when they actually do their part to return the bottle. So let me just use the word refund, deposit interchangeably. But clearly the reason why we bother is that there is a clear correlation between the deposit value and the return rate you get, right? And the collection rate or the return rate in every DRS is probably the most important success criteria for it. So when we look at deposit value, typically we look at kind of 3 key factors. It needs to be meaningful. So it should reflect the purchasing power of every country, and then make the consumers feel that it's actually worthwhile to return. And then secondly, it should be set at high enough value to actually motivate, say, up to 90% return rates, which is often the kind of the standard for a highly successful DRS, while not to be too high. And then in that case, that could potentially encourage fraud. And then it should also be set at the rate that motivates return, not only now, today, but also say in 5 years or 10 years from now, to make the DRS a future-proof solution. So very quickly on kind of how we have recommended then a potential minimum value for Singapore, then we have basically looked at different factors. comparing existing jurisdictions against the hypothetical deposit values in Singapore. So the factors we've looked at has been basically the deposit value measured in kind of a standard equal term, so using international dollars, then against, of course, the return rates. So typically then we see a clear pattern. The deposit value needs to be minimum certain amount in order to get up to 90% return rate. We have also then looked at deposit value against some typical product prices, and also counting for different material types. So PET, aluminum cans, they can have different value, or for example, different sizes of beverages. And inspired by the Big Mac index, we have also actually looked at deposit then as percentage of the price of Coca-Cola in several markets. So basically, after doing this quick and dirty exercise, then we have come up with the recommended minimum amount of deposit value for Singapore to be minimum 15 Sing dollar cent. So you might say that, 15 cents is probably too high or maybe too low. Now, obviously, this is not exact science, but I think that, and maybe, the panelist here, you can claim that, you would return anyway, right? And because you are diligent enough and you care about our planet. But I think it's important for us to remember that the DRS should be for everyone. And in order for us to, to really encourage up to 90% return rate, this then could be the suggested value from our side.
Thanks, Ben. Thomas, can I pick your brain and get your view? Who should deposit this value first if we're introducing the $50 cent?
Sorry, I said 15, so
yeah, 15. Yeah. No, I was just, there has been some inflation in the last few seconds.
Corrado, you always give me the difficult question, so I'm going to have to address it slightly differently. One of the things, before going to that question, is to highlight that as the Alliance, because we are a registered public charity, we don't really advocate or lobby for any legislation. I just want to be clear. The other thing, of course, is that, talking about DRS, we're okay to talk about DRS so long as, that specific government has already decided to implement it, right? So it's something that's sort of a reaction rather than to advocate for something. What I do want to say is that the Alliance feel that we need to create value for recyclers. So, how do you create value? Once you create value for it, there's a demand, right? So there's a demand in the marketplace. We feel that as an organization, we can concentrate and put some effort into creating those values so that it permeates itself, right, into the usual marketplace. So we actually have a thematic group of people working on this theme of creating value for recyclers. At the same time, we also have a group of people working on what we call design for circularity. So talk about plastic circularity, the circular economy. There is a tremendous amount of effort that goes into make sure that whatever we design for, whether it is the multi-layer packaging material or whether it is a certain type of material, that plastic material has been used for packaging, we think about circularity right at the beginning. Now back to your question, Corrado, which I honestly find it very difficult to answer because I'm not an expert in the DRS topic. I do understand that somebody or some party or some collection of organizations may have to look at how do you get this going right at the start. And frankly, I will have to skip this question. Because
but then if you allow me, then I will ask Kjell Olav, who should manage that value? Should we take the example and use Norway as the way of managing that collected value?
I think at least in Norway, the level of the deposit is set by the authority. And there's one good reason. Back in time, I argued that should be Infinitum's job to decide. But then I found that it's very difficult to inline producer and retailer and they manage them to agree at the same time because they are always afraid that the increase in deposit will decrease the sales of the product. Luckily, we had the same deposit value for over 30 years until 2018. Then the politician decided they want to double from 1 to 2 Norwegian krone. I'm not sure what that is in Singapore value, but still is a double. And then we go up from 85% deposit rate to 92. So it's obvious that you need to have the right level, and it's also costly to adjust the deposit value. So you won't do it too often because you have to change the barcodes and so on. It's not very difficult, but it comes with a cost. So you should do it maybe every 10 years or something. So, but I think if you look into the experience and all the data that TOMRA has, it's not that difficult to find a level that should be okay, and the deposit should be for everyone. And the experience also in Norway, when we doubled the deposit value, it had nothing to say for the sales because the people was already used to deposit and been there for 100 years. So I think that's important, and not be too afraid. It's more difficult if you set it too low than too high, because people that need the money, they will quickly learn that, okay, I get my money back next time I buy a product. So the total amount of money that are stuck when you have the empties at home is at very low level. You can increase the frequency of deposit if that's an issue for a household. So we see that, and we also see that low-income family, because we can look into product that we know are mostly sold to low-income family, we have a much higher deposit rate. And that's interesting because then we see that those guys then need to get their money back, so they will take care of all the empties. So, and then you see the other age product that's for young people, the cool ones, you have a lower deposit rate. So then you need to have a higher deposit. So, yeah. But we can prove in 2018, we had changed it, and you saw a huge increase, and that has a lot to say for the environmental impact when we managed to go up to 92, 93% deposit rate as we are at that time.
Yeah, which is the highest among all the countries having a refund system.
I think we are at the top. Yeah.
Yeah. Leng, to the third stream for those questionings on how to contribute to making DRS a success. How do you think that Singapore can actually go out and influence other neighboring countries once the DRS is implemented? What do you think will happen next?
Yeah, I think, thanks for the sharing so far. I'm also learning, and I think a lot of points have already been made by my fellow panelists. I thought one of the interesting things to highlight would be, if we wanted it to be large scale, we wanted it to be effective, the authorities would probably need to come in for legislation to even level the playing field. I think on two fronts, level the playing field so that everyone sort of have to pay the same deposit, or all retailers have to charge that amount. The other is really to provide the infrastructure. How do we have waste, how can the authorities work with waste collectors to put up more collection points so that's easy for the public to do it? Sometimes it's not that you don't have the intention of wanting to do it, you just can't find the collection point to do the deposit. So I think, if we wanted to roll this out, want to make it successful, the authorities have to come in. But that is only maybe 80% of the work, because I think that it will cover the broad strokes and the large spectrum of consumers and communities. But you probably, and this is not a plug for my NGO or whatever, but I think you do need specialized groups, niche groups to actually come and work with maybe corporates who are a bit smaller, who maybe can't fit or comply with a templated kind of legislation, or you need to work with community groups, as being, or Kjell, Olav said, low-income groups, maybe, in our context, they are the ones who get first hit because their disposable income might take a hit if you put a charge, and so on and so forth. So I think smaller and niche groups, you probably need an NGO to come in, or really have someone to work specially with them. So, if we get this right, I think then how can we scale up and then maybe share us as a successful case study to the rest of Southeast Asia or Asia? I think it's 2 points again. I think we have a lot of networks and partnerships, so a lot of them, the usual platforms and forums. But I think where we also have expertise is in, the technologies to recycle. Yeah, we don't have a plan now, but that is something that we are building up our technologies and capabilities in plastic recycling. We also have a very good infrastructure system, a waste management infrastructure system. I think that's where we can share our expertise and really help our neighbors. You know, if they want to go down the route of also implementing a DRS, these are probably the areas that we can share with.
Thank you, Leng. And unless there are questions from the audience. I think I will ask the last question to all of you, which is a little bit the same I asked to Leng. So I'm curious to get a very quick Kjell, Olav, Bing, Thomas, in 1-2 words, what does it take to make the DRS successful so that we can actually have this clean recycling economy via DRS? Kjell, Olav.
2 words, that's difficult. But I think in Norway, the politicians, they set up a very efficient regulation with the environmental cost model. So they didn't say that you needed the deposit system. It was up to the industry to find the most efficient solution. My experience is that with my board representing retail and producer, we have a very efficient dialogue because we always focus how to make the system better and to take in new products into the system. So we have extended it 4 new products as well. So I think good political decision say that we want the cost-efficient collection system, and then let the industry look into it, because the industry is very good at innovation if they just get the right sides from the politicians.
Thank you. Thomas?
Learn from others. I mean, this is not the first time that any country or any jurisdiction is doing DRS, right? So learn from others. There are success stories. There are also less good success stories, and these are good things that you put together and test whether or not it works in your environment. And the other thing I would say is be determined, which I know Singapore is very, very good at. So, you know, once you set your mind to it, you know, determined to do it, learn from others, put in your best practice, and it will work. You know, have confidence and faith that it will work, and it will change, I think, the mindset of, you know, all of us in terms of our role in recycling plastics.
Bing?
Thank you for giving me the pleasure to conclude. So I would like to summarize using 4 key principles. The first one being performance. It's all about driving high return rates. The second, convenience. So how to actually make the return easy for the consumers. Where do you place accessible, available return points? The third is producer responsibility. It needs to be based on EPR, but also having an efficient, balanced funding source. And finally, system integrity. So this system should be transparent. It should also have clear divided roles and responsibilities.
Thank you, Bing. We have one question. Kjell, Olav, if you can take it very quickly, and then we conclude.
Yeah, I saw a question about if you're running curbside as well as DRS, and that's yes. So we have both systems in Norway, and we actually compete. So most of the producers want to have a deposit mark and join the deposit system, but you can sell a PET or a can in Norway without deposit and use the curbside system. So that's right.
Thank you. And then for all the other questions that we are coming in, we will be capturing those and reply and attend those afterwards. I would like to conclude. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you to Professor Seeram. I learned a lot today, so I will like to conclude thanking you all, and please take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.